In this daily drop, we're going to talk about how to take the A7C II and set it up so that you can shoot with a 180-degree shutter angle when shooting at 24 frames per second. So let's go. Okay, brand new week, and here we are with the A7C II. Great little camera, a lot of camera for your money. It's a full frame mirrorless camera that can also shoot in super 35mm crop mode. And again, for your money, this thing can do a lot of stuff. But one thing that it seemingly can't do is shoot with a 180-degree shutter angle when you're shooting at 24 frames per second. Well, it can. So if you look down here, you'll see that the camera is set to a 1/50th of a second shutter speed. I'm shooting at 24 frames per second, which is not quite a 180-degree shutter. This should be reading at a 1/48th of a second like it can on a camera like the FX30, which I'm shooting with right now. But as is true with a lot of these cameras for manufacturers, the settings that you can or can't access are not always the same from camera to camera, even though you think they would be. And the FX30, FX3 kind of live in that cinema camera world, whereas this is more of a hybrid stills movie camera that is used for a lot of different stuff, but for some reason they didn't put that feature in there. So if I change the shutter here, you'll see I can go down to a 25th, a 30th, a 40th, I can go up to a 60th, so on and so forth, but I cannot get to that magic 1/48th of a second, so I'm exposing each of my frames exactly for half the time, which would be the equivalent of a 180-degree shutter angle. So there is a way to do it in this camera. What we have to do is go into the menu, the camera menu. We go into shutter/silent. Then you're going to go into this feature here called anti-flicker set, and we're going to go ahead and activate this. Now, this feature is really designed for situations where you're pointing your camera at something like a monitor and you're seeing scan lines, or there's a light fixture in the space that you are shooting in, and there's flicker happening because the frequency of that light or that monitor isn't the same as what you're shooting with the camera. So you'll see down here now that this number has changed, and as I change the shutter, it's actually changing it based on a hertz value. So if I go all the way down here to 48, I am actually, sorry monitor, I'm actually shooting at the same equivalent of a 1/48th of a second. So 24 frames per second, 48 hertz. That is exposing each of those frames for exactly half the amount of time. And now we have a 180-degree shutter angle. Now, I can change this if I'm shooting at other frame rates. Let's say, for instance, I was shooting at 30 frames per second and I wanted a 180-degree shutter angle. Unfortunately, I can't just choose shutter angle, but I could set it to 60 here. Now, of course, you can go back to shutter speed and set it to a 1/60th, but the advantage to this feature is if you are seeing flicker, scan lines, things like that, we can just go ahead and dial that up or down a little bit so that we can eliminate that problem. Ironically, the FX30 that's set up right here was seeing some scan lines on this monitor, so I went in and set this feature on that camera. That camera does have a 1/48th of a second option, as I said before, but I just dialed it up and down just a little bit, so close to a 180-degree shutter until I stop seeing those scan lines. It's a great feature. It lets you get to that 180-degree shutter angle on the A7C II. Again, if I'm shooting at 24 frames per second, I would go down to 48 as my number, and I would be all set to go. Hope that helps. Don't forget to, and I'll see you on the next episode of The Daily Drop.